welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show right here on SABC3. Start to a brand new day. Now, for women, having a period is a biological function. It is as natural as breathing, as odd as it may seem for some people. Now, although millions of women and girls experience menstruation on any particular day, it is a continued source of stigma for women all over the world. Now, many organizations have been trying to change the mindset around menstruation, but far too many people still believe it is embarrassing to talk about. Now, this morning, medical doctor Dr. Mathobela Matjekane will be telling us more about menstruation and how we can break the stigma this Women's Month. Good morning, doctor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, it's great to have you here in person. It's always so nice for us to be able to connect, and especially around an important topic. So I grew up, had the joy, the value of growing up in an all-female household, so maybe I'm a bit more comfortable in this space than most gents, but I have a girl child now. I've got a beautiful daughter that I want to be able to talk comfortably about, but most importantly, I want her to feel comfortable in her various stages of growth. So I think we've got to get over ourselves right now and be able to break down the stigmas, as you were saying. Maybe we can start at the beginning, because this feeds into why it's so important that we can talk about this, certainly within a family structure. What do women need to effectively manage their period?
I think the most important thing that women need to effectively manage their period is that they need to understand what is a period, which means from the first day, a menstrual cycle, which means from the first day when they have a bleeding up till the first day of the next bleeding, and that constitutes a menstrual cycle. So during that cycle, there will be a time whereby the lining of the uterus sheds off, and that is called a period. And that is a normal physiological process that happens in all women, and it's important for reproductive age. And the most important thing why women need to effectively manage that is so that they can be able to pick up any abnormalities that could be irregular bleeding, that could be heavy bleeding, and also if they are, maybe it's a girl child that is above the age of 15 and they haven't seen any period. So it's very important that we manage that whole cycle.
And are able to talk about it.
And be able to talk about it.
Doctor, what then happens when, menstruation isn't properly managed?
When menstruation is not properly managed, which would mean that a person is not aware of when they are having their next period, they're not sure of how long is their cycle, because the cycle can differ from 28 days to 35 days. So if they're not effectively managing it, they are most likely not to know when they are having any complications with their menstrual cycles. Things like heavy bleeding, like I mentioned, and sometimes irregular bleeding, or when they're missing their period, and in other cases whereby they have other diseases like polycystic ovarian diseases. So it's very important that they are aware of their cycle and they are aware of how their bleeding happens, how long it takes, and if there's any problems, any excessive symptoms around their cycle, then they can seek medical attention.
Maybe this plays out on a much bigger space when it comes to the status of women, when it becomes an emotional conversation, when we talk about that stigma, when we talk about how the misconceptions and the myths surrounding having a period have altered the way that we view women, and it really has happened at a most fundamental level. What are some of those myths that stand out, and how have they affected the status of women? Why do you think there are so many myths and these misconceptions around having a period?
Look, it dates back to ancient history, whereby I think there was so much hygiene issues around menstruation as a whole, and that affected how people interpreted menstruation. In other countries, it is viewed as a very unhygienic, unclean phenomenon in a woman's life, whereby you find that the women would be isolated from the society and they won't be even able to partake in other religious ceremonies, because those communities believe that the women are unclean, or they believe that the women will contaminate the environment and all that. So in answering your question is that it's very important to understand that the stigmas that are attached to menstrual cycle around hygiene, they need to be broken down so that women or young girls can grow up knowing that menstruation is a normal physiological process that happens to all women up till the age of 51 or so when they reach menopause. So other societies use menstruation to segregate women and not allow them to be to work functionally, maximally in their capacity.
Yeah, I think for me, if you've had a child and you understand the miracle attached to the reproductive cycle, that for me is where you really do get an understanding of it. But hopefully we are starting to break down that stigma right now.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad that you are here with us. And of course, if you have any questions, please hit us up on our social media, Expresso Morning Show, SABC3. Doctor will still be here to answer all of your burning questions with regards to menstruation.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're still keeping it locked right here to your Feel Good Breakfast Show on SABC3. Now, continuing with our health topic this morning, our medical doctor, Dr. Mathobela Matjekane, is still with us and will be answering all of your burning questions on the topic of menstruation during this Women's Month. It is such an interesting conversation that we were having right now, but sadly, there's still so much stigma regarding this. How do we then debunk the stigma around menstruation?
So what is important is to have more awareness and educational programs that are going to educate the public and also empower a girl child to know that menstruation is not supposed to be something that they are ashamed of or something that cannot be spoken about. So education is very, very fundamental, and young women need to know that it's a powerful process of life that everybody goes through. Yeah.
And I would imagine that education stems to parents as much as it does to young girls. We need to be able to have those conversations. So I'm going to broaden the scope a little bit now, and we've got some fantastic questions coming through from our viewers as well, so thank you so much for them. But something that really kind of grabbed my attention was some women have reported missing their periods during lockdown because of stress. Can the stress of lockdown affect menstruation?
Yes, stress of lockdown can affect menstruation, mainly because of the hormones that get triggered in the brain that can affect the hormones that are responsible for stimulating your periods to come. So your body views that as a defense mechanism, and then it doesn't operate as normally as it's supposed to be. So most women will or might have missed their periods during the lockdown because of the increased amount of stress and pressure and anxiety that most of them have been going through.
Oh, wow. Well, of course, we did ask on our social media if they have any burning questions for you, and a lot of people have come through with questions for you, Doctor. The first one is from Paulina Matapa. She says, how do you ease period pains using home remedies?
It's a tough one to answer. However, there are a couple of things that people try and that might help in relieving the pain. One can use warm water bottles, and also just trying to make sure that they are active, meaning they're regularly exercising, hydration, and also being careful of what they eat as well is very, very important.
And chocolates. Chocolates also.
Well, I suppose everyone is completely different, so it's not a one shoe fits all, unfortunately. Leandra Matthews asking, is it normal to experience extreme back pains and sleepless nights during your menstruation?
During your menstruation, one can experience a whole lot of symptoms, and those are mainly related to the hormonal imbalances that happens in your body. Back pain can happen, and in some conditions, women can have what is called endometriosis, which is whereby you have implantation of uterine lining in areas in your body where it's not supposed to be. So when they have their periods, then they can experience severe pain. So
is that like a cyst? How would that form?
It's more like the tissue has developed in an area that is not supposed to be. So one would need to investigate that and see the severity of the endometriosis, and also there are different interventions that we can introduce in that case, either surgical or even going on medication to alleviate the pain.
Oh, wow. We have another one from Pamela saying, is it normal to go on your period twice a month while breastfeeding?
It's not normal. And the reason that that would happen, one would have to look into the history of the patient, wanting to establish, are they on any contraceptive, or what else could be making their periods to be irregular, because that would be described as an irregular period. So that would need medical attention, and just to see what hormonal treatment we can give them just to bring back their period so that they have their period once a
and obviously, because you just had a child, your body is very different when you are
very much out of balance.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
especially in those I've kind of witnessed in those preceding months afterwards. There's a great kind of push and pull, bringing the body together. We've still got a ton of questions to get through, so we're going to have another segment to discuss and answer hopefully some of your burning questions. So thank you so much to all of you who have weighed in. Really interesting nuggets coming out of this one. So please keep those questions and comments coming on our social media platforms. And we're now going to approach this from a different angle completely, where Aral and Kutli are going to take us through a workout plan that might help with some of those aches and pains during this time.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You are live with Expresso as we continue our conversation around menstruation and debunking some of the myths and I think the stigmas attached to that. Dr. Matjekane now continues to answer your questions. Thank you so much for sending through so many and really interesting ones as well. We're going to pick it up now with Jolene Handraz's question. She was asking, I would like to know why when I get my monthly, I also throw up like I have morning sickness.
Okay, so basically, most people during their menstrual cycle, around just before they have their periods, they experience what is called PMS, which is a combination of symptoms that range from vomiting, nausea, abdominal cramps, diarrhea. So it's all because of the hormonal changes that are happening in their bodies. That's why they tend to get the nausea and the vomiting related to the PMS.
So it is normal?
It is normal as long as it's not affecting your day-to-day functioning. So if it's affecting your day-to-day functioning, then you really have to see a doctor to see what we can put you on just to try and make yes, the symptoms tolerable for you.
Awesome. We have another one from Lerato saying, what causes the pain and why do you become so moody?
That's from Lerato and all husbands and partners.
So basically, the pain happens because the lining of the uterus is getting shed off. So when that happens, there's prostaglandins that are produced that makes your uterus to contract as part of the menstruation cycle that happens. However, the severity of the pains varies from one person to the other. So it's also just a matter of assessing the patient and seeing, are they a candidate for maybe analgesics, non-steroidals that are just going to help with the pain and all that.
I mean, this next question kind of feeds off that, but speaks to a bigger question around it. I suppose every time in my period comes, my hormone imbalance changes drastically. I become very emotional, stressed and miserable. Are there any medications to balance my hormones specifically?
Yes, there are different medications that can be given to balance the hormones. They range from even your oral contraceptives that are going to help regulate the hormonal levels in your body, because sometimes in other women, when their hormones are not regulated, their hormones are all over the show, they get severe pain, they get irregular bleeds and all that. So the first line of treatment that we would start with would be oral contraceptives, and there's a whole range of contraceptives that we can prescribe for that.
We have another one from Tracy saying, my daughter sometimes doesn't get her period for months. What could possibly be the reason for this?
Usually when young girls start their period, there's something called dysfunctional uterine bleeding. That's when their body is readjusting to the new hormones. In certain cases, we have to put them on medication just so that they can have regular periods. So I would say it's important that they see a healthcare professional so that they can help just to regulate the periods and make sure that the daughter gets a regular periods, because that needs to be a cycle that their body adjusts to.
And to touch on that as well, it comes back to when growing up, your body's always changing. Before I had my son, I used to have my menstruation cycle for 3 days period. Now I have a 7-day cycle. So it's always changing. You're always changing. So it's good.
Part of growing
From
up.
phase
Part
to
of that,
phase. We can squeeze in one more. Anita Sacco-Pecure saying, I've stage 4 endometriosis dysmenorrhea. Vazan has helped me greatly. Can you please elaborate a little more on heavy menstruation and pain, endometriosis and the diagnosis thereof, and when ladies should seek help?
Heavy menstruation basically happens when you bleed heavily. So which means the amount of blood that is coming out, it's too much. You find that a person is changing their pad maybe every 2 to 3 hours. And in cases like that, they can also form clots, because the clots happen when there's too much blood coming out. There's different causes of that. That could be caused by fibroids, that could also be caused by certain family planning methods that are not good for the individual. And one has to investigate and see why is the person having that, as well as endometriosis. Endometriosis happens when you get the uterine lining getting implanted in a different part of the body, and that can lead to severe menstrual pains. That can also lead to heavy bleeding. So it's very important that when one has those symptoms, they seek a doctor to try and diagnose what could that be. An ultrasound will need to be done. In other cases, we might even need to do an MRI scan just to ascertain the cause of that. Because depending on the cause, that will determine the management thereof. Some of the conditions are even surgical. One will need to go into theater to either remove the fibroids or cauterize the areas and so forth. So it's something that needs to be investigated.
Needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Okay. Doctor, thank you so much. I mean, I've had a ton of other questions I'd love to get through, so maybe we can make this a more regular discussion to be had. I can only speak from a parent's perspective at this point, and say, have these conversations. If you have a daughter, make sure that you have an open two-way line of communication so you can talk about it. So if your young girl is experiencing anything that is irregular for her, that she does have the confidence to talk to you first. Don't leave it to the school.
Yes.
You be that first point of contact.
Yes, definitely. It's important for parents to have open conversations with their daughters so that they can feel comfortable to address whatever issues that they have, because it's when they have problems, then they won't know anywhere to go. They won't have anybody to talk to. Yeah.
Doc, thank you so much. Brilliant
It's a
discussion. We're going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much again to all of you who have weighed in with your comments and your questions this morning. Some absolute pearlers there, so thank you so much. We'll see you on the other side of a quick break.